our printing presses. And in between, we've got a special floor tour on the 14th of May, Sunday the 14th of May at 2 p.m. and that's commemorating the 80th anniversary of the sinking of the hospital ship, the Central of Morton Island. And that will be done by Jim Gilbert, who's in the audience today. So, some very interesting topics coming up. But over to today, the story of Wings over Redlands, our aviation heritage in our community. And I'll pass you over to Terence Hendricks, who's the Vice President of the museum. He's also President of the 23 Squadron City of Brisbane Association, and he's ex-South African Air Force and Royal Australian Air Force. So his heritage is in aviation, so I'll pass you over to you.
Thank you. Just to welcome everybody. Thank you for coming, especially to listen to me babble on. All right. Yeah, as Bruce said, I have three main interests. One's aviation, one's travel, and one's history. And I've been able to do all three in my lifetime, so I'm very fortunate. What we're going to do today is I'm going to just give you a real brief overview of Wings over Redlands, of the aviation. Can you hear? Oh. All right. Of the aviation in the Redlands. Just a brief overview, right? And then we'll go through the flying boats. The reason for the flying boats is that everybody knows about the flying boats, okay? And it's very, except you, yeah, there's one there, and we'll talk about that. After that, because it's so close to Anzac Day, we're going to just go through the military aviation of the Redlands, okay? And there was a hang of a lot of that, especially with 23 Squadron. 23 Squadron, this was their tactical air training centre, right? They used to fly in the Redlands all the time, all right? And you also had the United States Air Force. Well, they were United States Army Air Force, to be accurate. They flew here and crashed some aeroplanes here. And the Dutch East Indies Air Force also flew here. So we'll go through that. Now, it may be death by PowerPoint, but I'll try and get through it as quickly as possible. One other thing, I'm not the font of all knowledge, okay? So if you know anything else or something you disagree with, please come and tell me. I'm open to every suggestion. Already had a gentleman at the back who's going to tell me all about the crop dusting, which we have a brief overview of that, but he's explained to me that the crop dusting was actually on his farm, right? So that's awesome. Those are the kind of things that we want to know about, okay? We'll end up with having some tea and around the furphy. I don't know if you all know what a furphy is. It's the water carrier, and I will tell you all about that because that's got a lot of military significance as well. Okay? All right. I'm going to stand on the side there because I need to flick and I don't want to stand in front of you. Okay? And if I don't shout enough, give me a call. You're going to bring them up front. We'll just wait for the other gentlemen just to come up.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm here and I'm doing it.
Down the road, mate. Yeah. I used to watch him come here. Let's see, you'll notice something.
Sorry, everybody.
No problem.
You'll go.
Can you see?
Hello. It worked this morning. Where's Russell? It always. It's all about wings over Redlands, aeroplanes. Oh, here we go. You've gone too far, mate. Can we go back? Back. Other way. There we go. Back one. Thank you. I might have to come stand there. Just a weird. Ridiculous. Okay. All right. So this is just very briefly. 1929, Kingsford Smith joy flights outside the Grand View. If you go down there, he used to fly just in the old showgrounds. The aircraft he used was a 504 Avro, and there's a historical marker there with the photograph when you can go down and see there he flew. 1940 to 45, the RAF flew 23 Squadron. This was their training area, and 10 aircrew were killed in the Redlands. Okay? Then the United States Air Force, they lost a couple of aircraft in the Redlands, and I'll talk about them later. The Dutch DC-3, 1947, crashed into the sea, and the crew were all killed. 1950, crop dusting. 1950 to 1974 with the flying boats. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. All right? 1970, the Stradbroke airstrip was built by the Lions Club, and it's still there today, and they still use it. All right? And in 2014, 95 Wing received the freedom of the city. I don't know if you all saw that. They all marched through the city, etc. This is what a heritage marker looks like. We have 17 heritage markers around the Redlands. Can you see? Sorry, can you see? Around the Redlands, and they did, show you different things that have happened around the Redlands. Okay? And that relates to flying 23 Squadron losing one of their aircraft. You all know the difference between seaplanes and flying boats? Okay. Seaplanes have floats. Flying boats have hulls. Now if you look at these two up there, they are both flying boats. Even though they've got the floats on the side, they are actually both flying boats, which is different from seaplanes. That's a Twin Otter seaplane. Okay, big floats. You want to know just something about that? I don't know if any of you have ever flown in an otter. A Twin Otter used to be flown by Aero Pelican, right? Down here. That company went bust. A company called Viking bought the plans for that aeroplane, and they changed the engines, and they made them into seaplanes, and they're very, very successful now in Canada. That's a big flying boat. That's a real big flying boat. That's a Martin, and the Americans only ever built 5 of them, and they were for the military, but now there's 2 left, and they are used for firefighting. In 1946, flying boats are causing concern on the river at the Hamilton Reach, and in fact they were getting hit by tugs. And the government decided, well, they'll move it. So they moved it to Redland Bay, and that was selected. The first flight was by Barrier Reef Airways, and that arrived at Paxton Street Jetty in Cleveland on the 10th of December. The reason for that flight was nothing to do with the proving of the airstrip or the flying to Redland Bay. It was all about the Cleveland Shire having joy flights. And that was for the 100-year anniversary of the Cleveland Shire. And all the councillors got to fly on the flying boat. You all know down at Paxton Street, there the old jetty that used to be there by the courthouse. Well, that's where they left from. And Ansett Airlines bought Barrier Reef, and the 3rd of June 1953, the Redland Bay Airport opened. This is just to show you, this is the Princess of Cairns. This is a flying boat that was hit by a tug in the Brisbane River, and it partly sank. It was owned by Barrier Reef. And what happened there, they eventually raised it. It became a restaurant, and then they towed it back down to Southport. And unfortunately it sank on the way and never got there. So, it just shows you. Okay. That is the Barrier Reef Airways Sandringham VHBRD, Bravo Romeo Delta. That aeroplane was the first one to land as a Sandringham flying boat in the Redland Bay. Okay, that's what it looked like, different colours. Barrier Reef Airways was eventually bought by Ansett. Why is this thing so tricky? That's the next one? Yeah. Ansett Flying Boat Services started first regular base on the 3rd of June, and they used the Beachcomber. Now, I'll talk about the Beachcomber a little bit later. I'll show you some photographs. I've actually sat in that aircraft, and it's now in Southampton. Right? Qantas Catalina, EBC Island Chieftain, arrived from PNG. That's a Catalina, the one at the top there, the grey one. And that's what Qantas were using for Papua New Guinea. Qantas Sandringham Echo Bravo Victor Pacific Warrior, one of these, came from PNG on the 6th of June. And that was the first when they started. And they used to fly from Sydney to Brisbane or to Redland Bay, Noumea, Vila, Suva, Tahiti. Right? So this Redland Bay was a serious base for, it was a jumping off point for what they called was Qantas's Southwest Pacific Services. Just to let you know, the service that was started from Vila to Suva to Tahiti was actually done by a guy called P.G. Taylor. And he did it in a Catalina. He did the first survey. And what happened was, he did it, and then he bought the Sandringham, and the Sandringham he used, unfortunately, he went broke. Okay, and it didn't. Let you know, if you go down to Sydney and go look at the Powerhouse in Sydney, the Powerhouse Museum, there is Frigateberg 2. Except as of last week, I found out that the Powerhouse Museum has been closed in Sydney. Yeah. I have no idea why, but they've moved a lot of
Moving to Parramatta.
Is it going? Well, it's there. I don't know. I didn't know that it had been closed. But,
I think they're closed just for work at the moment.
go back. That's the Beachcomber. That's at Rose Bay, right? Years and years ago. As you can see, it comes out of the water on a like a stirrup, and they used to put it on there and then roll it up, because that didn't have wheels. Those are not the aeroplane's wheels. Those are just. That aeroplane Beachcomber was sold to Antilles Airlines at the end. From there, it was sold to, I think, Ryanair, and it ended up eventually in Southampton in the UK. And that's where it is today. Interesting thing I'll tell you about it now, that you all remember, or in my vintage, Maureen O'Hara, the actress, right? Her husband owned Antilles Airlines. And in the Beachcomber, they put a special seat on the flight deck just for her. And I've actually sat in it, so it's quite cool. Okay, this is the most famous shot of the Redlands. Every newspaper had this. This is the first flight, the old Bayside Bulletin, Redland Times, the Courier Mail. This is the famous shot of the first flight. Echo Bravo Victor, Pacific Warrior. Pacific Warrior was the name given. Qantas also used to change the aeroplanes to call them Sunbird Services, TAA. Now, if you go to Longreach, any of you been to Longreach? Okay, they have a Catalina there at Longreach now, but it's not done up very nicely. Last time I saw, it hadn't been painted. Is that correct? It was just sort of, you know, just a hulk, right? And it's unfortunate that Qantas do not have much information on the actual Sandringham flying boats. They have on their S-26s, you know, the Imperial flying boats, but not on this. That's what that aeroplane looks like today. in Port Moresby. At least it's still there. Okay. Notes of interest. Qantas used the Redland Bay Hotel as their booking office. Right? And they've now got a big plaque outside. And also, if you're going to the Redland Bay Hotel, you'll see they've got flying boats there. Got photographs of flying boats. They're all wrong. I have to tell you that. I went and I spoke to them, and they got the wrong aeroplanes, and also the photographs they got of the big cranes, etc., and warehouses. And Redland Bay have never ever had big cranes and warehouses. So, but unfortunately they don't want to change. I've actually written to the head office and said, we will give you proper photographs to make it authentic. But fell on deaf ears. Shell are awarded the refueling contract. There's a 44-gallon drum that was used, or that type of drum, and was on the ship, the cruiser Tasma. I've got a photograph that I'll bring up. And they used to just put all the 44-gallon drums onto the ship, take it out, and then hand pump the fuel. Health and safety a little bit different from today. 1953-54, the Redland Bay Airport had 1,000 flights per annum. People find that unbelievable. That's 3 a day. 3 a day. And that went for a couple of years. Right? So it was a busy airport. Right? What happened eventually, why the flying boats fell away, is because land-based aircraft became much more profitable, and they were more streamlined, etc., etc. So that's what happened to the flying boats there. You all know the seaplane ramp building at Victoria Point. Down there, there's the retirement village at Victoria Point. Okay, that was to be the base for the new flying boats. If I get this right. This is a little, shows you where they went, the route that they used to use. And they used to do the coast and Lord Howe Island. That's refueling. That's the Tasma. We've tried to find the Tasma. If anybody here knows what happened to the Tasma, please let us know. We've gone through files and books and everything, but we can't find it. And that's been refueled at Redland Bay. Let's say you used to get on board. Just to let, I don't know where this is. It just used to be a flight attendant. Flying. It's not Rose Bay. Any ideas? This lady here used to be a flight lieutenant, not a flight lieutenant, flight attendant on these aeroplanes. So, yeah, we've got to have a chat about that. Yeah. Okay, so this is where the flying boat base was going to be, and there is the ramp. Just go to the next one because that shows you much better. Now, if you go to that ramp today and you fall or slip, do not go to the Redland Council because they don't own it. It's actually an Australian Commonwealth asset that's now obsolete. And I think they're just too mean to chop it up. Right? And why it wasn't used was that it was too far away from the water. Okay, with the tides, etc. Yeah. Now, because it was used once, and once only. 1962, an East Coast Grumman aircraft came in and couldn't land at Archerfield because one of his wheels was stuck. So it was an amphibious flying boat. So he went around, landed at Redland Bay, they pushed it up, pulled the wheel out, pushed it up the ramp, fixed up the wheel, put it back in the water, and it went Only time it's ever been used. Now, if you go there, we've got a heritage marker that will tell you all about it. The same sort of thing. 1962, only time ever used.
And where is it? That red.
That ram,
Yeah.
it's in Thompson Street.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you go straight down Thompson Street, then you got the village. Yeah.
Tranquil Water?
Yeah, Tranquil Water.
Tranquil
Yeah,
Water.
right. And then just from there, straight there.
Not so.
All right. You can go to have a look any time and there's the Redland Bay landing sites. It's all, you know, Peel Island down at Redland Bay, so that's the site. A lot of farmers apparently used to complain. It was before my time, I wasn't living here then. But when they took off, they thought the seawater and the salt water would fall on the crops. And they didn't like that. But that's where they were. And obviously there's 3 strips where you can land. Right? Just to let you know, I've got a little brochure booklet here for each one of you that has all this, so you can take it home with you. All right? Okay. The last flight. Qantas stopped early, right? Qantas stopped in 1955, and then they gave, well, they didn't give, they sold their aeroplanes all to Ansett Flying Services. And then 21st of June was the last flight from New Guinea. The 16th of June, Redland Bay, Hayman Island flights, they stopped. And in 1963, Ansett flight arrives from Lord Howe. They also stopped, but then they started to fly to Lord Howe. Now, in 1965, Ansett, under their subsidiary Queensland Airlines, started the Redland Bay Gladstone service. Because the government was building the airport at Gladstone, and they had no way for people to fly there or get there. So Ansett took it over and they used to fly. That's an old timetable. Shows you when they flew.
How much it cost?
It cost about £8, I think, or 18 something. It was a lot of money. I think from Sydney to here was £18 or something. And the aeroplanes used to stop at Southport, is that right as well? Not in your time. Okay. Other ad hocs. The flights used to arrive and depart until 1969. 25th of October was the last flight from Lord Howe Island, and it came out to Redland Bay. It was a Sunday and left on the 17th. Redland Bay was nominated. I just want to say, how many of you remember 1971? I remember it like yesterday. Right? So it wasn't a long time ago. They were nominated as an alternative seaplane landing base, and in 1974, all the boats were sold to Antilles, and that's where they went. Okay, this is the Islander, right? This is the last flying boat. A couple of things I just want you to note, which I'll show you a bit later. Do you see the nose of this aeroplane? It is different from an ordinary Sandringham. Yes, I'll show you the beachcomber. The reason is that aeroplane was actually an ex-New Zealand Air Force Sunderland bomber. Okay, and Ansett, instead of sending it back to the UK to have it converted, did it themselves. But they couldn't get the nose right. And that's why the nose on this particular aeroplane is different. There it is there, it's a good picture of it. You can see the nose is different. X-Rose Bay. You know any of the people?
No, it was before that.
Oh, you'll be. Oh, okay. That just shows you. Yeah. This shows you just how big the aircraft is. You see this little propeller like the museum made here on the right hand side. We had the exhibition Wings Over Redlands, so we made this. It was actually going to be full size. If it had been full size, it would have been 3 meters in diameter, and that's the size of the prop there, as you can see. Yeah. Yeah. This is when being a flight attendant was glamorous and wonderful. And yeah. Yep. Hot pants and shit. Yeah, after your time.
Oh, wrong socks.
So that's obviously taken in Sydney. I look at that picture often. I just think.
Dreams.
Okay. So this here is the Sunderland bomber, and this is the aeroplane that after the war Shorts decided to convert them and to make them in Sandringhams. Okay? So this is what became the Sandringham aeroplane, which was flown by Teal, by Qantas, by BOAC, by Norwegian Air and everything. And that's what they used to fly around in the flying boat era. It was built by Shorts, and it's a civilian version of the Sunderland. That might matter to you, but it was powered by a Wasp radial engine, which is the same as the DC-3 and the Liberator bombers. The reason you mention that is because they're very, very safe engines. The very first ones came out, there used to be Pegasus, I think, and they didn't work so well. In fact, Teal, which was owned by Air New Zealand in those days, or Teal Airlines, they had an aeroplane with Pegasus engines, and they hated it, and eventually they got rid of it. Dual cabins, 22 to 45, depending on the configuration, and there were various variants, Solent and Hyson. Australia we had, and New Zealand only had Solents and Sandringhams. Big difference with the Solent, not that matters to you, it's a tail. I'll show you a photograph of the tail. That's what the inside was, upstairs and downstairs.
Good bedroom.
Yeah.
Is that correct? The galley's in the front. I'm learning here while we're talking, guys.
That's first class.
Eh?
It was all one class.
All one class. And I think when the aircraft used to take off, water used to come over the windows. And the water would take over the windows. So that's the upper deck.
Everyone dressed up.
Yeah, glamorous.
Very comfortable.
Now it should be. Okay. There's still 5 aeroplanes still in existence. Sandringham, the Beachcomber, that's located at the Solent Sky Museum in Southampton, the UK. I've sat in it, and it's got the Maureen O'Hara seat. And how they got it into the museum is they built the museum and left the back open. And when they got the aeroplane, they put it in, and then they bricked up the rest of the museum. I asked them if they'd sell it. I mean, just a moment of weakness, right? But they said no. The Islander is one that is for sale. And if you know anybody who would like to give us a quick 2 million, we can bring it back. It's actually in America. And that is the one that was converted, and that's the one that did the last flight out of Redlands Bay. All right? So there's the Beachcomber. Actually, beautiful aeroplane. See the nose? The nose, how different the nose is? Right? That's it there again. And that's the Islander in its new state now in Flight of Fantasy in America. That's the Islander again. Flying on. Now there's 5 other aeroplanes. There's the Rye Sandringham, Foxtrot Oscar Papa. There's a copy of it there. This aeroplane is known as the one that got away. If you go into the Queensland Air Museum, they've got a whole big spiel about it. What happened was, this aeroplane was actually P.G. Taylor's aeroplane, the one that went bust, the guy who did the Tahiti. He sold it to RAI, They then looked after it, and then when it ran out of airframe time and structure, they decided they would sink it. And the Queensland Air Museum said, no, please don't, we want it. What happened then was, because at the time, if you remember in those years, France and the Bikini Atoll and all the hassles of the nuclear and that, and the French said, no, you can't have it, and they took it back to France. Okay? And that's where it is today, in sad condition, I'll show you. The teal Solent, different tail, that's at the Motat Museum in Auckland. If you're ever over there, you should go and have a look at it. It's fabulous. They've really done it. And there's another one in the city of Cardiff, in Oakland. So that's what that aeroplane looks like. Very pretty, the way the French have done it. There's a model there, you can have a look at that. That's what it looked like before it went to Paris. Ex-frigate. That's what it looks like now. They're going to fix it. Gonna. Yeah. Okay, this is the aircraft in New Zealand. Beautiful. That's a different tail. That's the Solent tail. Now the thing was that these aeroplanes were all flying to Australia and Redlands Bay. So that's just the Cardiff. Here we are, flight to Southport and Surface Paradise by luxurious Ansett flying boats. What the, £8, 19 and sixpence.
No, if you get 6 months.
A single. You've got to come back again.
So I think that was one way, I would imagine.
That's what I think it is.
It was one way.
It says single.
Oh, single.
Okay. This is Martin Mars, as I said. This is also for sale. It's $5 million. I don't think they're going to get a buyer myself. Because just to keep it, if they want to keep it flying, it's ridiculous. Like, you know, to maintain it. Okay, I thought I'd just, because the world's now become military, and we've had a few little dramas, I thought I'd just show you what's happening around the world from a military perspective. Okay? This is Japan. Japan have a fleet of 14 of these, but this is their old aeroplane, and they use it for their civil defense. This is their new aeroplane. As you can see, it's a 6-bladed prop, and it's made by Mitsubishi. All right? So, and they use it all the time because of their outlying islanders, and they use it mainly for civil defense. All right? Now, it'll change, obviously. This is your wonderful Russian friends. They have this aeroplane. They've only made 2 of these. This one, that's a taking off. As you see, it's got its jet engine mounted at the back. Okay. So there's a lot of development going on now with flying boats again. Our wonderful friends from China. This is an aircraft that's flown by the PLAN, People's Liberation Army and Navy. It is an anti-submarine aeroplane or anti-warfare, sea warfare. It's got mines and torpedoes, and it's quite a deadly aeroplane, and they have a whole fleet of those. But not to be outdone, they have now produced this. This is the Chinese A6600. They've got 2 or 3 of them built already, and they're going to build another 14. These are going to be for civil defense, and they can take 40 stretchers and 50 civil defense workers. I hope you get the sarcasm, but and they're obviously going to be used like places in the Spratly Islands, where they will be able to get their troops or supplies to those islands very, very quickly. As you can see, it's also amphibious, so got a 6-bladed prop. It's a big aeroplane, and a lot of people are interested in getting it, but not to buy it from China. See the aeroplane in the back? That's a knockoff of the Boeing C-17. The Chinese are very good at back engineering or re-engineering aeroplanes. Okay. The engines are not so good at, but that's same size as a C-17, a Boeing C-17. American Navy are now looking at getting a seaplane. And you can see that looks just like the Japanese aeroplane. And that's what they're trying to get back. Understand this is not in the Redlands, but it just shows you just what's happened from the flying boats from the Redlands to where it's going now and in the current situation in the world. This is interesting. A company in Darwin have bought the rights to this aeroplane. And they are configuring, and they've got a new engine and new avionics, and they're going to sell it to the islands all around Australia. And that's just the Scandinavians being wonderful. So that's where we'll end, just about the flying boats, okay? And I'll just change it to, because we have to, we want to talk about the military, okay, in the Redlands. Any quick questions? Yeah.
What sort of speed do they fly at?
No. 240, 240 knots. Yeah.
Probably part of the problem, it wouldn't be near as fast.
No.
The answer is like 43.
Yeah, okay. And said at 43 passengers, but they could do straight from New Zealand to Australia, straight across, non-stop. So they could fly for a long time. But yeah, their speed, actually it might have their speed on the little book.
Yeah.
I won't read it.
Yeah.
Doug, you want to just give us a hand there, just to switch it over? Sorry? Oh, you're switching it to the next PowerPoint.
Oh,
Yes.
so it's not on this USB?
Yeah, so you switch it.
While they're doing that, I just want to let you know, these are at our front reception desk, information about those two that we're talking about. Okay?
Jim, you can do a little teaser.
It will be.
Hey?
Get Jim to do a teaser all the way.
You want to do a little teaser? No?
Don't take any fun, Laura.
Comes up Terence. Yeah. 183 knots. That's not quick. Oh, you want to just see if it's working? Yep, it's working. Right, guys, 23 Squadron. They started to fly, they were based at Longwood. They started, 23 Squadron started in 1937 in Perth, and they were brought across to Queensland, where they sort of became permanently based. They got their first 3 aeroplanes, Hudson bombers, and they were based at Archer Field. On the 10th of August 1940, one of them went on a survey flight, little navigational exercise, and was lost into the sea at Jumping Point. Okay. Was never found again, and the crew of 6 were all killed. Well, obviously they were never found. They sent out, and all they found was an oil slick. That's it. 1940. We actually, every year, we send out, we have the proper name for it is, yeah. This is what we do. We have one of these, okay? And these go out to every museum to all the RSLs and everything on the anniversary of all aircraft from 23 Squadron that were lost and the crews were lost in remembrance of them. So that was that Hudson bomber. All they found was an oil slick and gone. Nobody knows why, how, who, whatever. And we've got the squadron records and it just says aircraft lost and the crew listed. Very factual, nothing special, just all over Red Rover.
What position was it in at the time?
Sorry?
What position was the plane in when it was lost?
Oh, well, all we've got is that it was a couple of kilometres out to sea off Jumping Point. That's it. No other.
Nothing to do with the Golden Triangle?
No. I wish. Yeah, people, we like to think it might have been close to the Centaur, but, you know, that's just stretching the imagination, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, it's not fun. Good for a tale.
Yeah. We're away. This was the main aircraft that 23 Squadron started after the Hudson bomber, and they used to use this for a long time. It also went up to New Guinea with them. Unfortunately, the Zeros just shot it to pieces, and they lost everything. They were all destroyed. On the 15th of February, 1943, I think it is, two Wirraways collided over 42. Sorry, yes, no, I forgot. You've got a relative on there, haven't you? Yeah. Collided over Thornlands, right? One aeroplane crashed into where Ziegenfuss Park is today. The other one crashed in Wellington Road near the cemetery, and the wing of one of the aeroplanes landed on the Cleveland State School.
Oh my gosh.
Right. The crews were all killed. There were 4 of them, and this is Bob Gray. He's a 23 Squadron member, and one of his relatives was on that aircraft. So that's up there. You can see there's a Wirraway, the silver one going down at the top there. And if you look in that case over there, you will see all the there's some wreckage of the 23 Squadron Wirraway and the story of what actually happened. And in the corner there is also a historical marker, and they are, so we've got one at Ziegenfuss Park and one at near the Cleveland School, and obviously in the cemetery there's also military notification. 23 Squadron also managed to, well, let's put it nicely, land a few aeroplanes at on the beaches at Stratty. You can't help bad luck. They had power failures or whatever, and obviously most of the times the crews had to overnight on Stratty because they couldn't get, you know, services there to fix it up, etc. So they had about 4 or 5 aeroplanes that crash landed or force landed at on Stratty. That aeroplane's Australian made, and it was designed, started off with the as the American Harvard. The wings and all that are the same as American Harvard. It's just the tail and the engine and the cowling is made in Australia. That's different. This is a big aeroplane. This is a United States Air Force Marauder, and they also put one down on Stratty, on the main beach at Stratty. And but being America, they went out and picked it up, cut it up, put it on a barge, and took it somewhere, as you do, right? So, but that's what that, and that, we haven't got a marker on Stratty. At the moment, we've got no markers on Stratty with relation to anything that happened in the Redlands for military or any other aviation. Okay? Because we have to negotiate with the Quandalook people. Okay. This is a P-38 Lightning. This was based originally, we believe, at Redcliffe, at Spitfire. And what happened, one day we got a phone call here at the museum, and a gentleman phoned up and said, Dad and his uncle and his brother have got a couple of propellers for us. And we said, yeah, there they are there, okay? And we said, you're joking, you know? Anyway, they said, would you like them? We said, please do. They brought them in, and they were actual genuine propellers from this aeroplane. We were able to find out they've got serial numbers, so we found out what aeroplane. Now, if you go onto the internet, there's a couple of sites called, one's Oz and War, the other one's called Pacific Rex, and you can see which aeroplanes crashed into the sea or around about here in the Redlands. Okay? This aeroplane was flown by Second Lieutenant Martin, and he came from Satan's Angels. That was his squadron, and he crashed into the sea. I think it's the 15th of July, 1943. 2 days after that, 2 Aero Cobras flying from Redcliffe, one at 9 o'clock in the morning, had a power failure and crashed into the sea. The pilot was killed. 3 o'clock that afternoon, the same airfield, the same squadron, the guy, American guy, took off, crashed into the sea and was killed. So we got a bit of, it wasn't that aeroplane or that style of aeroplane, but we actually have, that's a very popular aeroplane. It was a great fighter aircraft. So if you want to have a look at the propellers, there's 2 of the 3 propellers down there, or the blades. Okay, this is an ensign, right? The Air Force is currently refurbishing an ensign up at the Heritage Centre down at Amberley. You may want to know why it's there. The photograph of this is to talk about the Centaur. Okay. You all know that the Centaur, 80 years ago, was sunk off Moreton Bay, right? Moreton Island, right? And yeah, but what a lot of people don't know is how it was actually, the survivors were actually found. And they were actually found by 71 Squadron Ansett aircraft. And what happened was, they took off from Kingaroy and they were on a navigational exercise. And they were just flying down in the sea, over the sea at least, not in the sea. And the turret guy, he looked and he saw an oil slick. And he said, oh, what's that? And he spoke to the pilot. They then circled back and they found the survivors of the Centaur. Now, what happened then is they were on radio silence and they couldn't tell anybody. But as they were going down, they saw the American cruiser, destroyer, the Mugford, and they used their Eldest cameras, lamps, to signal the Mugford. And the Mugford then came back and picked up the survivors. And then they went back and landed at Lowood, right? 71 Squadron doesn't exist anymore today, right? However, 23 Squadron used to service this aircraft, and because 23 Squadron is sort of now the mother squadron for South East Queensland, we've taken it under our wing and we are doing a plaque. There's a special memorial in conjunction with the Caloundra RSL and who else? The Rotary. And on the 14th of May, there will be a plaque set up on the memorial at the Centaur. As luck would have it, this time we have the American attaché, military attaché, is flying up from Canberra to be with it. I must tell you that the Americans, whether you like them or not, they really do a lot of things to promote their services. We, 23 Squadron was based at Lowood during the war, and we did a big dedication. Daisy Road was the main runway, and we refixed that up and we got dedication. What happened was, the headhunters, the American headhunters squadron, was based at Lowood before they went to New Guinea. They actually flew their president over from America for the dedication. So they do support things like that. So if you want to see, we've got a photograph of the Centaur, just in the third aisle down there, I think it is. So if you want to have a look at that.
Was the Centaur hospital ship?
Yes. Where's Jim? Where's James? Where's Jim? Gilbert? Has he left? Oh, this gentleman here will tell you all about it. Come
On the
listen to his
14th
speech.
of May at 2 o'clock.
14th of May. He'll tell you all about it. The only thing I'm telling you now is just about
You'll miss that one.
71 squadron.
You'll miss
Yeah.
that one.
Okay. This is interesting. This is a DC-3. It's in different colours. But the Dutch East Indies Air Force, after the war in 1947, were servicing one of their aircraft at Archerfield. And it had 3 Australians on board and 3 Dutch East Indies officers, and they went for a test flight. And it crashed into the sea after flying for 23 minutes at Point Lookout. And just after that, the next day, the RAF sent a diver down, or somebody sent a diver down. They found the aircraft. They didn't retrieve the bodies, and they came back. When they went back to look for the aircraft again, it was gone. Now, they couldn't find it, so they believe that the currents moved it away or whatever. However, in 2015, the RAF have a scuba diving team, just like, it's one of the clubs. And in April 2015, they found the part of the wing and the wheel, one wheel. And that's the only bit that's ever been found. Now, if you go to Stradbroke Island, on Straddy, down to Point Lookout, the Dutch government gave $3,000 to build the park. So there's, just at the bottom of the hill before you go up, there's, I think they call it the D&I Park or something, and there's a memorial to that crew. And the Dutch government gave $3,000 to pay for that. And and finally, this is number 23 Heavy Bomber Squadron. There's a Liberator up at the top. A lot of people don't know about the Liberators, okay? Australia only had 7 Liberator squadrons during the war that flew in the Pacific. Why it's up there is we're going to start promoting the Liberator squadrons, but what was I going to say this about the Liberators? My mind's gone. I'm sorry, guys. But the Liberators, that's what what I was going to say. 23 Squadron after the war morphed a lot of other squadrons. So 6 Squadron today, which fly the Growlers, the Super Hornets and that, out of Amberley, are actually ex-23 Squadron. They started from 23 Squadron. That's how 6 Squadron started. Also, our 75 and 77 Squadron, they started in New Guinea out of aircrew of 23 Squadron. So 23 Squadron is now the biggest squadron in the Royal Australian Air Force because it's based at Amberley, and it has 351 permanent staff and 200 and something reservists. So it's Australia's biggest squadron now, and it's on the biggest base. If you've ever been up to Amberley, you'll see it's where it's all happening for Australia. And that, ladies and gentlemen, on time, rushed through 11 o'clock. If you want to ask any questions, please do. And here's your booklets. The booklet. Oh, lovely. My flight attendant's going to give up to no one. My flight attendant offered to.
Thanks everyone. Morning tea at the rear.
Just before you go, to have morning tea, Terence, fabulous talk. Thank you very much for that. I greatly appreciate what you said and gave the information you gave to me about the Anson. giving that finding the survivors of the Centaur. That was a little bit of information we didn't know. We knew a plane saw these survivors, but we didn't know where from. So that information that Terence gave to me was absolutely fabulous. And in answer to the question over here, the Centaur was a hospital ship sunk out off the other side of Morton Island by a Japanese submarine. As hospital ships are, fully lit, red crosses all over it, sunk by a Japanese submarine. And I'm not necessarily here to give a plug for my talk, but if any of you like to come along, obviously book at the reception, 2 o'clock on Sunday the 14th of May. My wife lost her husband, lost her father and her uncle on that ship. So it's a pretty emotional day for my wife, and it'll be a pretty emotional day for a lot of people concerned on that particular day. It's the 80th anniversary of its sinking. Terence, thank you.
Yeah, no,
Thanks, Terence.
and just one other thing, Bob. Who's your relative on the guy on the... yeah, Bob's uncle was one of the air crew who got killed in the Wirraway. Wow. As well, 23 squad. So, yeah.
Was there any major runways within the Redlands?
No. Not runways per se. No. Okay. There was a strip on Stratty, which was done by the Lions, and that's still there. There were a couple, I heard today, on one farm, there was a strip for crop dusting, and across the road from the Bowls Club, right at Raby Bay, that used to be a mud flat and mangroves. Yep. And that's where they used to pick up all their supplies, and the crop dusters used to fly from there. But other than that, we haven't found any military airfields or anything. Not around here, that was it.
Yeah, there was the door lights here.
Oh, yeah.
But after that,
Probably, in all honesty, probably just on the show.
Excuse me.
That thing's on the Grand Hotel. Yeah, because in those days,
It's not. It's not. What are you doing?
We're just going to start. You should never assume.
No.
Terence, you mentioned the Queensland Air Museum.
Yep.
Where is it?
Okay. Well, there's a lot. Okay. I think one of the best ones. Okay. No, I'll start. Caloundra.
Yes, I know that one.
Okay, that's a big one at Caloundra.
Yeah.
Caboolture's got 2. Okay, unfortunately, they had one that was just all vintage aeroplanes, and that's just closed. But there's the Caboolture Air Museum, right? And
you say
so
one
that's
of them?
there. And then at Amberley, you go to the Heritage Aviation Museum. The only problem with that is you just go on the website and you actually have to get, you have to have a bit of security. So you have to give either your ID or something. And then when you get there, and it's only open once a month, but it's opened for groups on Thursday or Tuesday. And it's all run by volunteers. And it's fabulous. It's really nice now. And they've just finished the Anson, and they've just got one of the first helicopters, and it was flown by 23 Squadron. It's a Sikorsky, I don't know if you know, people used to call it a dragonfly, with like all just windows in the front. They've just refurbished one of those. So
I think there's a small museum at Evans Head, I think.
there's one at Evans Head, and there's an F-111 there.
Yes.
But they also, the story is they're going to close them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because the developers, if they want to build property there. Yeah. But see, Evans Head's also the bombing range.
Yes,
So, you know, it might not be in the interest to close it.
Yeah.
Anything else?
The aircraft
Cup of tea,
museum,
Anzac biscuit?
aircraft museum at Caloundra. That's not the Maroochydore one, is it?
No, that's
No,
that's
no. I didn't even know they wanted to reach you do it.
No, not Maroochydore, you mean?
Yeah, Caloundra. Yeah. And
More
there's a big
commercial.
and there's a big one at Oakey.
Oh, right.